Hey folks, it's Cuda here. Today I'm going to take a look at an amazing older lens that's still available today by Canon called the Canon EF 100mm 2.8 USM Macro lens. So today we're talking about this macro lens. I have it here in front of me, and this is a lens that was built by Canon back in 2000, believe it or not. This was back when film was king. It was back when honestly the quality of the lenses for the most part was nowhere near the quality today, but there are exceptions, and this is one of those exceptions. This lens right here is still available today, and that is a testament to how sharp it is. Now on the back here I have my MC11 Sigma MC11 converter that I use for Sony, but this is what it looks like in the EF mount. So you can still use this today with the Canon gear with an RF adapter, and I would highly encourage you to do just that. But we're going to take a quick look at it today. We're going to do a review of this little bugger, and I really think when I'm done with this, you're going to be like, wow, that is truly a hidden gem. So the way I want to work this is just like I always do. We have, of course, the introduction. I just had that. We've got the overall build. We've got specs, and then I'm going to follow up with images. And we're going to take a look at, just how good this lens truly is today. So let's talk about the overall build. And so when you look at this lens right here, okay, it has a very familiar feel to me. Being a Canon guy for so many years, the build quality is very much like any of the USM lenses. And USM is just an ultrasonic motor that Canon came out with. And you'll know them, you can tell these lenses because if you look right here, there's a gold ring around the lens. And that is a dead giveaway that this is built during that USM craze, if you will, from Canon. On the side, you've got a switch. You can be manual or autofocus. No image stabilization. We'll talk about that in a little bit. On the back, again, your standard EF mount. So you can see what that looks like. On the front element, see what that looks like. And just an excellent little lens. It's compact. It's not heavy. We'll talk about that also. And it just happens to make a nice little addition to my Sony setup. This is my A7R III with that lens mounted. It makes for a fairly lightweight, combination. I use this a lot in the field whenever macro is required. So what I'm going to try to do today is I'm going to try to show you that sometimes you can find these gems out there, and they're inexpensive, and they work just as, well, maybe not just as good, but so close to a modern lens that you really have to question, whether you should buy a newer lens or stick with the older lens. So let's talk about the specs. Focal length, of course, is 100mm fixed focal length. The APS-C equivalent would be, on a Canon APS-C, would be 160. On the Sony APS-C cameras, it's going to be a 150 lens. And on those cameras, it does give you a little bit more working distance, just a tiny bit. The construction of the lens is 12 elements in 8 groups, so very typical of a fixed focal length lens. It doesn't have a lot of elements in it. Min aperture is 2.8, of course. The max aperture, f32. It's got 8 aperture blades. A lot of lenses today have 11 or greater. So that's an issue. It does produce on the on the bokeh, or the highlight bokeh, I should say, you will notice that it has more of a hexagonal shape to it. And so that's something with older lenses that you might want to be aware of. It weighs 1.32 pounds. Now, for the size of this lens, 1.3 pounds is maybe a little heavy, but not really. I mean, the camera's much heavier with my grip. I don't even notice the weight of that lens. So weight, not an issue. It does not come with a hood, which is interesting to me. There is a hood that's available. It's the ET67 hood. You can buy one of those online. And the price of this is $599 new, or do what I recommend doing, which is purchase a lens from KEH or Adorama or B&H used for around $350. I mean, that's something you can't beat for a quality Canon piece of glass. And that's the route that I would go personally, and the route that I chose. I actually kept this when I went from Canon to Sony a couple years ago. This was one lens that I had already decided I was going to keep. The other lens that I decided I was going to keep, and this is just a little extra information, was the little 50 millimeter plastic Fantastic here from Canon, and we'll do a review on that as well. But that was another one that made the cut. So the reality is that this is a lens that has stood the test of time. It's a lens that I think you'll see in a minute is worthy of its reputation. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to take a look at some of the photographs that I have taken recently. And I could have gone back to my Canon and looked at some of those as well. And there will be a couple of those in here, but most of them were taken with at least a 24 megapixel camera, so you can see what that looks like. Okay, let's talk about the images here. So on the 100 macro, the first image here, now this is going to be with the older 7D Mark II combined with the 100 macro. And I've also used some extension tubes here to get a 2:1 ratio. So this is 2 times life size. Now, what in the world is this? This is actually a Canada goose feather. It's a piece of it. And what's interesting about this is it actually looks like wood to me. This looks wooden. And it doesn't look like a feather. It's just so close up. I really love this image. One of my favorites from the 7D Mark II. And again, as I already mentioned, you'll see this is f8. That's kind of a sweet spot. That f8, f11 is kind of a sweet spot, 1/60th of a second. And just a beautiful, sharp image. If I zoom in here, you can see how sharp it is. Just amazing. Look at the water droplets are just so sharp. Quality is amazing. Okay, next image. Now we're talking about using the 100 macro on the Sony A9. And I've actually pulled back a little bit here. You don't have to shoot everything at 1:1. Although this is close to 1:1, it's not really 1:1, and so it's maybe a 1:2 here, probably is what it looks like. And you don't have to always shoot at 1:1. You can pull back, and you still have incredibly close focusing capability with this lens. And on the Sony A9, I mean, just incredible quality, incredible sharpness. Lots of detail here. This is a focus stack, not a huge focus stack because the wing is a little bit out of focus over here, but still, I don't know, maybe a five frame focus stack here at most. But nice color, beautiful quality, sharp. Love it. That's 1/320th of a second f5.6. Down a little bit here, trying to get a little bit more quality out of it. As far as the ISO, I'm down to ISO 400. So just a beautiful image. Next image, sunflower. Now, this isn't a giant sunflower like you're used to seeing. This is a black oil sunflower, which comes from the black oil sunflower seed, which is what we feed our backyard birds with. And this is what it results in. It's probably, maybe 4 inches across. Much different than those massive sunflowers that we harvest sunflower seeds from. This is more of a, really, I think more of a what a sunflower would have looked like more in the wild originally. But this is a pretty large focus stack. If we zoom in here, you can see just how sharp this lens really is. 1/500th of a second, f9, an f9 focus stack at ISO 1000. And look at the detail, just amazing detail in there. And even the flowers that border the seeds here, just amazing detail. You can see the ants down here. And one thing that's kind of interesting with this shot, which I didn't even notice at first, if we go into 300%, which is just off the charts, what you're going to see right here in the middle, that is an ant actually stuck inside some kind of bubble of water or nectar, and it cannot get out. It is literally stuck in there. So very cool. Very cool. Just a little, no extra charge for that one. Just a little neat thing that you get with macro photography there. All right, so on to the next shot. Now, this was a shot that I did for a commercial project I was involved in. These are 7.62 by 39 millimeter AK-47 SKS rounds, and these are from Russia actually. And you can see here, this is a small focus stack shot with the 100, and this was the A7 III, not the A7R III, but the A7 III, which I owned previously. I replaced that with the A9, and I'm telling you, the quality of that camera is just, I mean, I love the detail that sensor was able to bring out in these bullets. Just astounding detail. I mean, things you don't even see in a bullet, like, you know, these little just scrapes and scratches and dents and all of that. It's just neat, you know. And even in the casings here, you can see all the scrapes in the casings from sizing it and so forth. Now, the interesting thing here is this is f4 at 1/25th of a second. So this is an f4 stack. And still the sharpness is great. Can't complain. Okay, next image. This is the 7D Mark II shot. And this was actually a fossil, a coral fossil that's kind of embedded in what looks like, I guess, maybe sandstone or something, it looks like. And this is only about an inch across right here, total. Very, very small. I used extension tubes on this one as well. And if we zoom in here a little tighter, you can see just how much detail. Even that 7D Mark II had a lot of detail in it. Very good camera. It got some bad press, which it didn't really deserve. But just an astounding camera. I wished if Canon had come out with the 7D Mark III, as I had hoped they would, I may have stayed with Canon. It's really hard to say at this point. So that's a half a second, f11, ISO 400. Okay, moving on to the Baby Eastern Bluebird. This was not a focus stack. Or was it? It may have been just a slight focus stack, maybe like 2 images put together. Hard to say. I can't remember. This was taken quite a while ago. 1/250th of a second, f9. I would say with the depth, field here. I probably focus stacked a little bit here. So, but you can see it's just it's mostly in focus. I mean, it's pretty sharp. This was, again, I think this was the 7D Mark II again, actually. And you can just see the detail. Look at the detail in the mouth right there. Oh my goodness. Great little camera, great little lens. Absolutely love it. Okay, ISO 400. And then moving on to the Eastern Bumblebee, common Eastern Bumblebee, in bee-balm, a bee-balm flower here. I'm really utilizing a lot of shallow depth of field here to give it more of an artsy feel. Really the only thing that's in focus here is a little bit of this flower, the eye of the bumblebee, and a little bit of its wing, maybe a little bit of its leg here and there. And the rest of the image this is not a focus stack. The rest of the image is largely out of focus. This was kind of an interesting shot. His head is just about all the way into this flower. 1/12/50th of a second, because I'm shooting bumblebees after all. f4.5, ISO 6400 on that one. And that was the A7 III, the Sony Alpha 7 III. Next shot. Now this is a black belly salamander at f3.5. So very shallow depth of field here. This was not a focus stack. 1/100th of a second, 100 millimeter, of course. ISO 400. Really, the only thing that's in focus is that right eye. He is tiny. These salamanders are absolutely tiny. Might be 3 inches long, maximum. 2.5, 3 inches long. This is full frame, uncropped image, I believe, on the A9. Might have been cropped just a tiny bit. Yeah, it was cropped. I'm sorry, it was cropped. Cropped this down quite a bit, actually. But you can see that even here, the eye is just, it's really hard to get it in focus. When you're in that f3.5, you're getting down into, and this is another reason I wanted to show this, you're getting down to that close to that f2.8, and it has such shallow depth of field for one thing. It looks like the focus fell right here mostly. But even with the sharpening and so forth, you're going to have some softness here. And that's really what I was going for with this image anyway, although I would have liked to have seen that eye a little bit sharper. Maybe I'll run that through Sharpen AI and see if I can get that to pop a little bit more. Okay, next image. This is a cattle heart butterfly. Now here's another example of just because you have a 1:1 macro lens doesn't mean you need to use a 1:1 representation of your subject. So here I have really a 1:2. I love the white in contrast with the black here. I think it really came out nicely. Let the flowers be a little bit on the hot side, so they're really, really white, contrasting against that really, really dark brown, almost black, and in some cases I think it is black here. Really a neat butterfly. 1/400th of a second at f5.6, ISO 500, and that's with the Sony A9 or Alpha 9. Okay, same sunflower. Just took this the other day actually with my A9. Same sunflower, again pulling back, not necessarily going to the 1:1 magnification. This lens makes a great portrait lens and a nice nature lens that's sharp and you can pull back on it. And here I've got the whole center of the flower, and if I were to zoom in on here, you can really see the detail up in each of these flowers that border all the seeds here in the center. It's really quite amazing in quality. Okay, so I think you can see really the diversity and of quality of this particular lens, and kind of where you can go with it in your own photography. It's really just my go-to lens for macro. I have to be straight up honest with you. And I probably will not replace it immediately. There are times I would like to have a 2-to-1 macro, but having the 1-to-1 with extension tubes, as in with the goose feather here, it's hard to go wrong with that, right? I wish I would have included another butterfly shot that I have, so you can really see that was a true 1-to-1. I don't have it up here right now, but that's it is a lens that is versatile. It is a lens that is capable. It is a lens that will not break the bank, and that's really, really important. Anyway, let's move on to the next segment and kind of wrap this thing up here. Now, you may want to be a little bit aware of the fact that you may run into issues with higher megapixel cameras. In other words, the resolution may not quite be there for, say, a 50 plus megapixel camera, and that's just something you'll have to decide for yourself on. And there's a lot of things that come into play here. I wanted to talk about the 2.8, that this is a 2.8 lens, but understand that it's a little bit soft at 2.8, just a little bit soft. And so when you start shooting with a 40 megapixel plus camera, you may notice that f2.8 you have to do quite a bit of sharpening to get it into focus. But I don't do that. When I shoot macro images, I'm shooting images of flowers, I'm shooting images of insects, and I'm going to start shooting at about f8 and probably f11. And then I'm going to do what's called focus stacking in post-production. And that's just the process of taking multiple images at different focuses, or you could also say different distances from your subject, and then combining them using a special program like Photoshop to create one image that's perfectly in focus from wherever you specify it to start to where it ends. And so focus stacking is a modern tool that makes a lens like this, frankly, still a very viable option. I can't say enough good things about the quality of this lens just from every perspective. Now, is it steel? No, it's not it's not going to be equivalent to, say, the L version of this. There is an L version that's available that's obviously going to be better. I mean, certainly. There's other things that we probably need to discuss here. Some people will be put off by the fact that you have to pay extra for a hood. I mean, for me, I never even use a hood with this lens. But if you were going to shoot directly into the sun with it, might be a good idea to buy a hood. You can get third-party hoods online fairly inexpensively. You're probably also going to run into issues, just as I was saying, f2.8 will give you some issues with softness. You're also going to run into diffraction softness past f16. So if you're up there shooting at f22, f32, you're going to see some diffraction softness, and that's another reason that I recommend personally learning how to do focus stacking, where you can shoot this lens at its sweet spot, which to me is around f8, f11, maybe even 5.6. But that is where this lens really shines and really is amazing, amazing at the on the quality side. So the pros and cons of this lens. It's got a solid build construction. We already talked about that. It is very sharp, and as you saw by the images earlier, it's very sharp, or later, depending on where I put them in this video. Again, it's somewhat soft at 2.8. I mean, it's somewhat soft at 2.8 as a con. As a con, it's also soft past f16. We talked about that. It doesn't have image stabilization, so that's another thing. Back when this came out, image stabilization wasn't it was just catching on. The more expensive lenses had it built in that Canon had. The L lenses, certainly, the 300 f4, the 600 f4, you know, lenses like that, they had image stabilization built in. But most of them in this mid-range classification did not have them. Is it an issue? Well, it may have been an issue, say, 4 years ago. But today, when you're talking about marrying it up with a mirrorless camera with five-axis image stabilization, like my A7R III here, that's really a moot point now. I can simply just go on the back of my camera. I can set it to use the image stabilization for a 100 millimeter lens, and now it's a stabilized lens. So it's again helping to breathe life back into some of these older lenses, and they really are an amazing bargain in the market right now. That's really all I had for pros and cons. I guess if I had to mention one more thing, maybe the zoom or the focus ring is really smooth. I really like it. It's just a typical Canon ring. It's the dampening is perfect. It doesn't want to spin. Like if I do this here, let's just say I'm trying to, if I do that, it doesn't spin. But if I just apply a little bit of pressure, it's just very, very smooth. Can't argue, can't complain. When you buy Canon glass, particularly in the mid or upper range systems, you're really getting some good glass. And that's kind of a larger point to all of this, which is if you're looking to marry some glass to your Sony products, or even your RF on the Canon side, some of these EF lenses make a tremendous bargain still. They may not be as fast focusing. Now, that's another thing I wanted to talk about is the focus speed on this. This is not a lightning fast lens here. As a matter of fact, when you marry it with the MC11 and the A7R III, your focus is going to be a little slow, and it may not even focus well. But it's a macro lens. It's not supposed to be for focusing with AF. It's supposed to be primarily. That's why it has such a good focus ring. It's designed to be used with that focus ring, and I use focus peaking in here. It really just is. It's a tremendous combination. I just recommended that. Someone was talking to me just the other day, and they said, hey Matt, I love your macro images. What lens are you using? And I said, well, I am using the old Canon 100 f2.8 USM lens, 1:1 macro. And they were like, oh, how do I get one of those? And so I told them, I said, best deal, go to KEH, go to Adorama, whatever, pick one up for $350. I sent her a link, and so she avoided spending $1,000 on a new macro lens when she may only do 5 macro shoots a year. Why do you want to spend a mega amount of money on a macro lens? Unless that's all you do, then I get it, right? It is only a 1:1 macro, so there is that. So if you want to go say 2:1, which is 2 times life size, you can use extension tubes on here, which I highly recommend and I do use. And you'll see in the images that I do have at least 1 or 2 2:1 images in there. So very versatile rig, good rig that gives you a decent amount of distance. Not quite as much working distance as a 180 macro would give you, but still an amazing lens. For the price, you really can't beat it. It's stunning quality, and something that I really hope that people will take advantage of, especially those that are on a budget. You just can't go wrong. Anyway, so to recap, and in conclusion, obviously I highly recommend it. Obviously it's a lens that if you're looking to get into macro and you don't want to spend an enormous amount of money, this lens right here is my recommendation. There are other lenses out there. There's a myriad of other lenses that are somewhat in that same category, but you're not going to go wrong with QA. You're not going to have QA problems necessarily, you know, with Canon gear and Sony gear. And so when you get a little gem like this, I just want to pass it on. And you know, let me know how it works out for you. Go ahead, send me the images you made with it, and tell me what you think, because I think it's still a great bargain. Now, in the next 10 years, you know, our resolution on our cameras will probably exceed what that can produce. But for now, it's amazing. That's really all I had for this review. I want to thank you for watching. As always, make it a great day and get out there and enjoy nature. Bye-bye.